In the peaceful village of Akko, a hard-working farmer named Ado and his loving wife, Eki, shared a bond that was unshakable. They had been married for 5 years, and although their love was strong, their hearts longed for a child. Every morning and evening, they knelt side by side, praying earnestly for a baby who would bring laughter and joy into their home. Despite the whispers of concerned relatives and villagers, Ado and Eki never lost faith. They believed that, in time, the heavens would bless them. Finally, after 5 years of waiting, their prayers were answered. Eki was pregnant. The news spread like wildfire throughout the village, and excitement filled the air. Friends and family rejoiced with them, offering words of encouragement and support. As the months passed, Eki's belly grew, and so did Otto's anticipation. He would often place his hand on her stomach, feeling the tiny movements of their unborn child and whispering promises of love and protection. Then, on a warm evening after hours of labor, Eki gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. As Ado held her in his arms for the first time, tears of joy welled up in his eyes. She was perfect, her delicate features a blend of both parents, her tiny fingers curling around his. They named her Yuki, a name that symbolized hope and blessings. To Ado and Eki, she was more than just a child. She was a gift, a miracle, proof that patience and faith never go unrewarded. From the moment she opened her eyes, Yuki became the light of their home. Her laughter filled the air like music, and her presence brought a renewed sense of purpose to her parents. As she grew, the villagers couldn't help but be drawn to her charm. She had a warmth that made people feel at ease, a kindness that won over even the sternest elders. Even the king and his wives took notice, showering her with gifts whenever she visited the palace. Despite the passing years, Ado and Eki's love remained unwavering. Their home was filled with laughter, love, and gratitude. Yet, as time went on, some of Ado's relatives grew concerned. Yuki was their only child, and tradition dictated the need for a male heir to carry on the family name. At first, Ado ignored the pressure, dismissing the notion that his love for Eki and their daughter was not enough. He was devoted to his wife and saw no reason to disrupt the happiness they had built. But as the whispers turned into outright demands, doubt began to creep in. Ado found himself torn between the deep love he had for Eki and the expectations of his family. What had once seemed like an unshakable certainty now felt like a looming storm. And as time passed, the pressure to take a second wife became impossible to ignore. From the moment Ada stepped into Ado's home as his second wife, an unspoken tension settled over the household. To the villagers, she was a stunning young woman, chosen for her beauty and what they assumed was a kind heart. But beneath her charming smile and soft-spoken words lay a heart filled with jealousy and resentment. Ada had entered the marriage with high expectations, believing she would soon hold the highest position in Ado's household. However, it didn't take long for her to realize that no matter what, she would always come second to Eki in Ado's heart, and that was something she couldn't accept. More than anything, Ada resented Yuki. From the moment she arrived, she saw how Ado doted on his daughter, how Eki's face lit up whenever Yuki was near. Worse still, the villagers adored the girl, praising her beauty, kindness, and gentle spirit. Even the king and his wives favored Yuki, showering her with affection. To Ada, this was an unbearable insult. Why should a child, not even a boy, receive so much love and admiration while she, the new wife, was barely acknowledged? At first, Ada hid her jealousy behind forced smiles and polite conversation, but the bitterness inside her only grew. She became cold and dismissive toward Eki, making little effort to hide her disdain. She spoke to her with sharp words, always finding ways to belittle her in front of others. Eki, however, remained patient. She refused to be drawn into Ada's bitterness, choosing instead to focus on her daughter and her husband. When Ada discovered she was pregnant 3 months into her marriage, she finally felt she had the upper hand. Her excitement was undeniable, but it wasn't just because she would soon be a mother. She saw this as her chance to solidify her place in Ado's household, to push Eki aside and make herself the most important woman in his life. If she had a son, he would be the rightful heir, and Yuki would become insignificant. With this newfound sense of power, Ada's cruelty escalated. She taunted Eki daily, boasting about how her son, would inherit everything. She laughed at Yuki's presence, claiming the girl would soon be forgotten. Every word she spoke was meant to cut deep, to break Eki's spirit. But no matter how harsh Ada became, Eki refused to let her words shake her. She held on to her love for Adu and Yuki, finding strength in their bond. But fate had a way of humbling even the most prideful hearts. When Ada finally gave birth, she was met with crushing disappointment. Her child was a girl. The moment she laid eyes on her newborn daughter, all her arrogance and cruel words came back to haunt her. She'd spent months tormenting Eki, declaring that only a son mattered, only to find herself in the same position. The reality of her failure filled her with rage. And instead of softening her heart, Ada's jealousy burned even hotter. If she couldn't be superior to Iki through her child, she would find another way to take everything from her. As the years passed, Yuki blossomed into a radiant young woman, her beauty matched only by the kindness in her heart. She carried herself with grace, always willing to help those in need and treating everyone with warmth and respect. Her laughter was infectious, and her mere presence seemed to brighten even the darkest days. It was no surprise that the villagers adored her, nor that visitors from neighboring villages often spoke of her charm. She was everything her parents had hoped for, a daughter who brought joy wherever she went. Even within the royal palace, Yuki was a beloved figure. The king and his wives took special notice of her, offering her gifts and treating her with the kind of admiration usually reserved for royalty. The queen in particular often remarked on Yuki's gentle spirit, saying that she was a rare gem among women. Though Yuki never let the attention go to her head, it was clear to all that she was destined for something greater than the simple life she had always known. One fateful day, an unexpected event would change Yuki's life forever. As she and her half-sister Amen made their way back from the river, they encountered two elderly men standing beside a broken-down cart. Their faces were weary, their clothes dusty from travel. Seeing their distress, Yuki approached them with concern. "Our cart broke down on the way to the palace," one of the men explained. "We need water to cool the wheels and rest before continuing our journey." Without hesitation, Yuki nodded. "Of course, I'll fetch you some water right away." Ammon, standing beside her, scoffed. "Why should we help them? They're just strangers. Let them handle their own problems." Yuki turned to her sister with a gentle but firm look. "Because it's the right thing to do." Ignoring Ammon's protests, she hurried back to the river, filled a large pot with cool water, and carried it back to the men. They drank gratefully, wiping the sweat from their brows. As they finished, one of the elders looked at Yuki with an unreadable expression. "You have a kind heart," he said. "Not many would offer help so freely." The other man nodded. "We are emissaries from a neighboring kingdom. We came to seek a bride for our prince. We have met many young women on our journey, but none have shown the kindness you have today." The weight of his words hung in the air. Amen stiffened beside Yuki, her jaw tightening as jealousy flashed in her eyes. But Yuki, unaware of her sister's growing resentment, felt only a mix of excitement and nervousness. The elders smiled. "We will return soon with an official proposal." As the two men walked away, Yuki's heart raced with anticipation. She'd never imagined such a future for herself, but the possibility of becoming a princess was thrilling. Yet, standing beside her, Amon remained silent, her fists clenched at her sides. She could already feel it, the bitter sting of jealousy creeping into her heart, just like her mother before her. The day had finally arrived for Yuki to leave for her new life as a princess. The entire village gathered to send her off, their hearts filled with pride and joy. Her parents, Adu and Eki, held her tightly, whispering words of love and encouragement. Though the tradition of the prince's land forbade them from seeing their daughter for a full year after her marriage, they promised to visit her at the palace as soon as the time allowed. Yuki, draped in exquisite royal garments, was radiant. She was accompanied by Amen, her half-sister, and a personal maid assigned to ensure her comfort throughout the journey. As they set out on the long road to the prince's kingdom, Yuki felt a mix of emotions: excitement for the life ahead of her, but also an unease she couldn't quite explain. The journey took them through forests, hills, and rivers, but it wasn't until they reached the banks of a wide and ominous river that Yuki's fate took a terrible turn. This was no ordinary river. It was known to the villagers as a place of dark magic, a cursed body of water where those who dared to swim were never seen again. Stories told of people vanishing beneath its surface, only to emerge transformed into creatures of the water. As they approached the river, Amin suddenly stopped and turned to Yuki, a sly smile playing on her lips. "You must bathe in this river before meeting the prince," Amin said. It will make you even more beautiful for your wedding day." Yuki hesitated. "But I've heard stories about this place. It's dangerous." Eamon scoffed. "Those are just old wives' tales. Do you think a future princess should be afraid of some silly legend?" Yuki frowned, but something in Eamon's tone felt off. She had never trusted the river, and she wasn't about to start now. She shook her head firmly. "No, I won't do it." Eamon's expression darkened. The patience she had been holding onto finally snapped, and in one swift, cruel motion, she shoved Yuki forward. Yuki gasped as she stumbled, her arms flailing as she tried to catch her balance. But it was too late. The moment her body hit the water, a strange sensation coursed through her. The world around her blurred, her limbs felt foreign, and an eerie silence filled her ears. And then, everything changed. Where once had been a young woman full of promise, now swam a majestic fish, its scales shimmering in the moonlight. Yuki had been transformed, her human form lost to the cursed waters forever. On the riverbank, Eamon stood victorious, her chest rising and falling with exhilaration. She turned to the maid, her eyes burning with a silent warning. "You will tell no one of this," she hissed. "If you value your life, you will stay silent." The terrified maid could do nothing but nod. Without looking back, Eamon gathered Yuki's royal robes and adorned herself in them. She fixed her hair, adjusted the jewelry, and took a deep breath. When she turned back to the road, she was no longer Eamon, the jealous half-sister. She was Yuki, the princess, and she was on her way to marry the prince. The Grand Palace welcomed Eamon with open arms, oblivious to the dark secret she carried. Dressed in Yuki's royal garments, she walked through the palace gates with confidence, her head held high, playing the role of the future princess perfectly. The king, queen, and the prince himself greeted her warmly, delighted by her beauty and grace. A lavish feast was held in her honor that evening. The entire kingdom gathered to celebrate the arrival of their new princess. Music filled the air, dancers performed in her name, and the people cheered with joy. Eamon smiled and laughed, accepting the admiration that rightfully belonged to Yuki. But beneath the facade, a sliver of unease crept into her heart. Only one person in the palace knew the truth, the maid who had witnessed everything. But she remained silent, too afraid to speak, knowing that exposing Eamon could mean her own demise. Yet no matter how much Eamon threatened her, the maid's heart ached for the real princess who was now trapped in the cursed river, lost to the world. Each night, unable to bear the guilt, the maid would sneak out of the palace, slipping away under the cover of darkness. She carried food hidden beneath her shawl and made her way to the river's edge, where she would softly hum a melody only Yuki would recognize. The first night, she wasn't sure if Yuki would come. But as the haunting tune floated across the water, the river stirred. A moment later, a shimmering fish with bright, intelligent eyes emerged, its tail flicking beneath the surface. The maid gasped, recognizing Yuki instantly. Though her form had changed, the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. "Princess," the maid whispered, her voice breaking. The fish swam closer, as if understanding every word. Carefully, the maid poured the food into the water, watching as Yuki ate. Night after night, this secret meeting continued. The maid would bring Yuki food, whispering words of comfort, promising that she had not been forgotten. But secrets never stay hidden for long. One evening, the prince, having grown suspicious of the maid's late-night disappearances, decided to follow her. Keeping a safe distance, he trailed her through the palace gates, down the winding paths, and toward the river. He watched from the shadows as she knelt at the water's edge and began to sing. Then, he saw it. A majestic fish, unlike any he had ever seen, rose from the depths, its scales gleaming under the moonlight. But it wasn't the fish that stunned him. It was the sorrow in its eyes. A chilling realization gripped the prince's heart. Something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, he turned and ran back to the palace. His parents, the king and queen, needed to hear this. Before the night was over, the truth about their so-called princess would finally come to light. The prince could barely contain his shock as he burst into the palace, demanding an urgent meeting with the king and queen. His parents, though startled by his urgency, listened intently as he recounted what he had seen: the maid's secret visits to the river, the haunting melody she sang, and, most importantly, the majestic fish that had emerged in response. The queen's face paled. "A fish with sorrowful eyes," she murmured, exchanging a glance with the king. "This isn't just any fish," the prince insisted. "I believe it's her, the real princess." The revelation sent a shiver through the room. The king, a man of wisdom and careful judgment, wasted no time. He summoned the village priest, the elders, and the maid herself. Trembling with fear, the maid was brought before them, knowing that she could no longer keep the truth hidden. With the prince's reassurance of safety, she fell to her knees and tearfully confessed everything. The hall fell silent as her words settled over them like a heavy fog. The woman they had welcomed, celebrated, and treated as royalty was a fraud. The real princess had been betrayed and transformed into a fish by her own sister. Anger flared in the prince's chest as he clenched his fists. He had sensed something was off about Aemon from the beginning. Her arrogance, her lack of warmth, the way she carried herself with an air of entitlement. But never had he imagined such a sinister deception. A plan was swiftly put into motion. That very night, under the cover of darkness, the prince, the elders, and a group of skilled fishermen made their way to the river. The maid, their only link to Yuki, stood at the water's edge and sang her familiar song. As expected, the river stirred. Moments later, the brilliant fish emerged from the depths, its tail flicking gracefully, its eyes filled with a silent plea. Before Yuki could disappear beneath the surface again, the fishermen sprang into action. Their nets, woven with ancient blessings, sliced through the water, capturing her in a single, decisive motion. The river roared as if in protest, waves crashing angrily against the shore, but it was too late. Yuki was caught. The prince gazed at the shimmering fish, his heart heavy. "Take her to the village priest," he ordered. "We will break this curse." Carried with great care, Yuki was transported to the sacred shrine where rituals older than time itself would be performed. The process was arduous, 7 days of chanting, offerings, and sacred rites. But the kingdom waited with bated breath, believing in the power of their ancestors. Then, on the 7th day, the impossible happened. As the final chants echoed through the shrine, a blinding light filled the room. The fish shuddered violently, and within moments, Yuki's human form was restored. She gasped as air filled her lungs, her trembling hands reaching for the prince, who rushed forward to catch her. Tears streamed down the queen's face as she whispered, "She's back." But as the kingdom rejoiced, one final matter remained. Amon's treachery had yet to be punished, and justice was about to be served. Yuki stood in the palace courtyard, surrounded by the people who had once believed she was lost forever. Her parents clung to her, their eyes filled with tears, unable to believe that their beloved daughter had truly returned. The villagers, the elders, and even the king and queen looked upon her with admiration, not just for her beauty, but for her strength, her resilience, and her unshakable spirit. But before peace could truly be restored, justice had to be served. Aemon and her mother, Ada, were dragged before the royal court, their faces pale with fear. They had lived in the comfort of stolen power for too long, but now their deceit had caught up with them. The prince's voice was steady but filled with anger as he addressed them. "You tried to erase the woman who showed you nothing but kindness," he said, his eyes locked on Aemon. "You stole her future, her name, and nearly her life. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Aemon looked down, her lips trembling. For the first time, she had no lies left to tell. No manipulation could save her now. The king's voice carried through the court. "For your wickedness, for your betrayal of your own blood, you and your mother are banished to the evil forest. You will live out your days among those cast out for their treachery, and you will never again set foot in this kingdom." Gasps rippled through the hall. The evil forest was no ordinary exile. It was a place feared by all, a land of desolation where only the most outcast souls were sent. Aemon collapsed in despair, but no mercy was granted. The guards seized her and Ada, dragging them away as their cries echoed through the palace. Justice had been served. With the shadows of deceit finally lifted, the kingdom turned its focus to celebration. Yuki and the prince's wedding was a grand affair, a testament to love's triumph over jealousy and cruelty. For days, the people rejoiced, not just for their future queen, but for the victory of truth over lies, of goodness over evil. Yet, among all those who had played a part in this story, one person stood out: the loyal maid, the one who had risked her life to keep Yuki's spirit alive. Her unwavering devotion did not go unnoticed. In recognition of her bravery, the prince's younger brother took her as his bride, ensuring that she, too, was given the love and happiness she had helped preserve. As the years passed, Yuki and the prince ruled with wisdom and kindness, their story passed down through generations. But this tale is not just one of magic and royal destinies. It is a story of human nature. How often do we see jealousy take root in the hearts of those closest to us? How often do people, blinded by envy, destroy relationships, sabotage happiness, and betray those who once loved them? Amon's downfall serves as a warning: jealousy and bitterness can only lead to ruin. Yet, just as darkness exists, so does light. Yuki's triumph reminds us that kindness, patience, and faith in the truth will always prevail. The maid's loyalty teaches us that small acts of goodness can change the course of history. And the prince's wisdom in seeking the truth shows us that leadership is not just about power, but about justice. So let this story be a reminder to us all: no matter how deep the deception, no matter how strong the storm, the truth will always rise. And in the end, love, courage, and integrity will always win.